I wasn't embarrassed to be a plumber, but apparently my sister was. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and I had just driven over 800 miles from Boise to Santa Monica, just to be on time for her little intimate dinner with her new boyfriend's family. She'd invited me a week prior, somewhat hesitantly, but I didn't think much of it. I thought, maybe for once she wanted to reconnect. Maybe she remembered who stood by her when our parents died and who paid every cent of her college tuition at Berkeley. I showed up at her apartment with two things, a bottle of wine and a heart full of hope. But before I could even get through the door, she glanced at my work shirt, Parker Plumbing, sewn proudly across my chest, and froze. "Can you not wear that tonight?" she whispered. I blinked. "It's clean." She hesitated. These people, they're really particular. "Can you just say you're in real estate or something?" That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not because I felt hurt, although I did, but because I realized that somewhere along the way, the sister I raised had turned into someone who thought honesty needed to be hidden. That the man who paid for her degree didn't deserve to be seen for what he actually did. But I played along. For the sake of keeping the peace, I changed. I smiled. I sat through the dinner. And I bit my tongue when her boyfriend's friend said, "Always nice when the help is this efficient," as I served the appetizers I cooked. What happened next changed our relationship forever. Because that night, she didn't just disrespect me. She taught me a lesson, one I had to teach back, even if it meant breaking her world apart. I woke up the next morning with a bitterness that ran deeper than the cold coffee sitting untouched on my kitchen counter. I had driven over 800 miles overnight from Santa Monica back to Boise, hazard lights blinking the whole way just to keep myself awake. But nothing could keep me from reliving every word, every look, every fake smile at that dinner party. It played over and over. Sophie didn't just hurt me. She erased me. She denied me. And worse, with one cold sentence. "He's not really family, just someone who helps sometimes." She swept away everything I'd done for her. I used to change her diapers. I stayed up all night when she had a fever. I was the only one at her high school graduation when every other kid had their parents there. I worked endless hours, even slept in my van during peak season, just to make sure she never. And now, she was embarrassed. I didn't cancel her tuition right away. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the spreadsheet. Over the last 2 years, I'd spent more than $85,000 on her tuition, textbooks, dorm fees, even her shopping sprees and salon visits, things she never even asked if I could afford. I sighed. That money could have opened a second branch of my company, but I never once regretted it. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. "Thanks for last night. Everyone said the dinner was amazing. Hope you understood why I asked you to be vague about your job. Chase is really image conscious. No apology. No thanks for driving 900 miles just to help." Just another cool message reminding me that I was a liability in her carefully crafted image. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app. The Sophie Tuition Fund, a separate account I started when she was 16, still had $26,000 in it. I stared at it for a long time. My finger hovered over the transfer button. Then I closed the app, not because I was angry, because I finally realized something. I wasn't helping her anymore. I was enabling her. I had given her everything, but never taught her to value anything. The lessons I had learned through sweat, busted pipes, missed holidays, and calluses, she'd never had earned. Maybe it was time she did. 3 days passed. I didn't respond to her texts. I didn't transfer the next semester's tuition. And right on cue, Sophie called. Her first words weren't, "How are you?" or "Thanks again." They were pure panic. "What's going on?" "I just got an alert from the school saying my tuition hasn't been paid. They're going to drop me from my classes in 48 hours. I kept my voice steady. "I know." She paused. "So, you did this on purpose? Are you trying to mess with me?" I exhaled. "No, Sophie. I'm setting a boundary. You've gotten used to getting everything without consequence. And when the person funding your life gets treated like a secret shame, you think that comes with no price." I didn't want Chase's family to judge me," she stammered. "They're important to me, and I'm not." The silence on the other end was louder than anything she could have said. Then, almost like a reflex, she snapped. "So, will you just let me drop out of school?" "No," I said calmly. I'm going to let you figure it out. There are scholarships, grants, financial aid, state schools, part-time jobs. You're smart enough to figure it out. But my money? That chapter's closed." She hung up. I didn't feel regret, but I did feel empty. That evening, I grabbed dinner with Trevor, my friend and lead technician. Over burgers, he reminded me of something he once told me during our hardest year. The best workers never apologize for honest labor. Welders, mechanics, cooks, if they're good at what they do, they deserve more respect than any CEO who built an empire on borrowed flash. 6 days later, Sophie showed up at my office unannounced. No makeup, wrinkled white shirt, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a lazy bun. Not the polished, Instagram-ready version of her I'd gotten used to. "I'm sorry," she said, standing at the door. I didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod. "I want to understand what you really do," she continued. "I want to see it for myself. I'll work for free if I have to. Just give me a chance." I pressed my lips together. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a real lesson. I didn't say yes right away. Truth be told, I wasn't sure letting Sophie into my workspace was the right decision. Part of me still felt raw, still stung from that night, when I was made to feel like an embarrassment in front of strangers by the very person I'd raised. But there was something in her voice that day, something different. It wasn't polished or practiced. It was shaky, honest, worn down, like someone who had just hit a wall and, for the first time, realized no one was going to save them. Monday, 8 a.m. Be on time, I told her. Dress practical. No heels. No runway makeup. She nodded, almost like she was bowing. "Thank you," she said. 3 days later, she actually showed up. Right on time. Dark jeans. A plain crew neck shirt. Hair pulled back. No lipstick, no designer bag, no performative pep. Just focus in her eyes, and maybe a little fear. I didn't hand her anything glamorous. I started her with the basics. The kind of tasks she used to roll her eyes at: confirming service appointments, entering invoice data, responding to customer maintenance emails. I figured she'd complain, lose patience, maybe even walk out. She didn't. She sat. She worked. Slowly, carefully. At one point, I noticed her staring at the laminated service menu on the wall. She looked over at me and asked, "Do you charge per hour or per project?" I was surprised. "Depends. Most of our customers prefer flat rates." "What?" She bit her lip, thinking, if I redesigned your pricing sheet, added seasonal discounts, a referral bonus, and made it social media friendly, do you think it would bring in more bookings? I stared at her for a long second. "Try it," I said. And that's how it started. Sophie, my sister who once asked me to hide my job, began to see what I hadn't. She suggested we launch post-service surveys to boost 5-star reviews. She streamlined our intake forms to make them easier for older customers to understand. She even recommended renaming one of our plumbing packages to sound less, well, like plumbing. A month later, she looked up from her laptop and said, "I think I'm going to use your company as a case study for my marketing class." I raised an eyebrow. "You're going to stand up in front of a college class and talk about Parker Plumbing?" Dead serious. My professor's teaching a unit on service-based business models. He loves real-world examples. I nodded slowly. "Well, go for it. But just a heads up, I'm not showing up to any lecture in a suit." She laughed for the first time in weeks. And not that fake, filtered laugh from her Instagram stories. This one was real, warm, the kind of laugh I used to hear when we played board games after dinner as kids. 2 months passed. Sophie was still with the company. Not because she couldn't afford to leave, but because for the first time, she saw value in building something with your hands, in earning trust from clients, in keeping things running that most people don't even think about until they stop working. And for the first time in a long while, she saw me. Not as just an AC tech, not as the guy she tried to hide, but as her brother, the builder, the one who never quit. By the end of Sophie's second month at the office, something had fundamentally shifted. Not just in her schedule or her routine, but in her voice, her posture, the way she asked questions, the way she listened when clients called to complain about a clogged pipe or a leaking basement. There was empathy now, awareness, a humility that hadn't been there before. And then came the moment I didn't see coming. It was a Thursday afternoon, and we had just wrapped up a long staff meeting. Sophie had taken notes the whole time, adding a few quiet suggestions about client retention emails and a loyalty program she'd been researching. Nothing flashy, just thoughtful, precise contributions. That alone was impressive. But then, during our post-meeting cleanup, she approached me. "I got invited to a panel," she said, almost cautiously, "at Berkeley. It's a student-run event about career diversity and entrepreneurship. They want me to speak." I blinked. "You?" She nodded. "I think it's mostly because of the case study I submitted. The professor circulated it to the department. I guess they were impressed." "That's pretty great," I said, genuinely proud. "You going to talk about your classes or your marketing plan?" Her eyes locked with mine. "I'm going to talk about you." I wasn't expecting that. She continued, "I'm going to talk about how I used to think success meant suits and titles. How I thought trades were beneath me. How I was wrong. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat tightened too fast." Sophie reached into her tote bag and pulled out a printed flyer. "It's next Friday. I know you're busy, but it would mean a lot if you came." I took the paper, stared at her name in bold letters under the words "Redefining Success." Then I looked back up at her, and for the first time since she was 14, I saw the girl I'd raised. The one who used to sit on my lap while I taught her how to check tire pressure. The one who once cried when I scraped my hand fixing the kitchen sink because she thought I was bleeding too much. I nodded. "I'll be there." That following Friday, I sat in the back row of a medium-sized lecture hall, arms crossed over my chest, surrounded by bright-eyed college students in hoodies and overpriced sneakers. Most of them probably assumed I was maintenance staff waiting to fix a projector. Sophie stepped up to the mic in black jeans and a blazer that still had the tag tucked in. She cleared her throat, glanced around the room, then began. "I used to think I knew what success looked like. I thought it wore tailored suits, had degrees on the wall, and avoided dirty work at all costs." There were a few chuckles. She went on, "I used to be embarrassed to tell people my brother was a plumber. I even asked him to lie about his job once. And I'll never forget the look on his face when I did." Silence. Because in trying to impress people who didn't care about me, I nearly lost the person who did. She paused, voice steadier now. "The truth is, I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for him. He didn't just pay for my education. He showed me what resilience looks like, what integrity means. And now, I'm working at his company. And I'm proud of that." I sat frozen, not because I didn't believe her, but because I never thought I'd hear those words come out of her mouth, in public, no less. After the event, several students came up to her with questions, praise, LinkedIn requests. A few even approached me, surprised to learn that I wasn't just the contractor. One guy said, "Honestly, sir, I never thought about trades like this before. You make it sound like a real career." I shook his hand. "It is." That night, as we drove back, Sophie looked over at me. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "All of it." "I know," I replied, "and I'm proud of you." A few weeks passed. Business continued to grow. We signed 2 new commercial contracts, thanks in part to Sophie's revised pitch decks and customer engagement emails. My field techs started calling her boss's brain, half jokingly, because of the way she handled scheduling nightmares and payment disputes. But it was one quiet evening, after hours, just the 2 of us left at the office, when she brought up something that stopped me in my tracks. "Have you ever thought about expanding?" she asked. I looked up from my computer. "In what way?" "Like a second location. Maybe somewhere with more commercial clients. I've been running numbers. If we keep growing like this, we could double our revenue in 18 months. And with the new green energy tax credits, if we branch into solar-friendly HVAC systems." She stopped, noticing my expression. "What?" I leaned back in my chair, hands behind my head. "I've thought about it, but I never imagined doing it with anyone else. Until now." Her eyes widened. "You mean," "I'm saying, if you're serious about the business, not just helping out, I consider bringing you in. As more than just staff. As a partner. Eventually." Sophie blinked fast, tried process. "I'm serious," I said. "You've earned that conversation. You've shown up. You've added value. And most of all, you've changed. In ways that matter." She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly, eyes shining with something between awe and purpose. "I want that," she said. "Not just for me. For us. For what we've built." We didn't make any formal agreements that night, but something unspoken passed between us, an understanding that our story wasn't just about hurt or healing. It was about what happens when you stop waiting for someone to change and instead create space for them to grow. And sometimes that space looks like an office full of wrenches, spreadsheets, and service requests. Sometimes success doesn't come with applause. It comes with respect. Spring in Boise brought with it the usual wave of maintenance calls. Air conditioners that had gone untouched all winter, now coughing back to life. Offices requesting full system overhauls before the heat set in. For us at Parker Plumbing and HVAC, it meant long days, tight schedules, and zero room for error. But this spring felt different. There was a new rhythm in the office, a kind of quiet confidence humming just beneath the surface. Sophie was no longer just helping out. She had become a core part of operations. She came in early, left late, and more than once, I caught her talking a frustrated customer down with the kind of patience I hadn't seen since my mother was still around. Her proposal to explore a second location in Twin Falls had taken root. Quietly, steadily, she was building a plan, organizing potential site lists, analyzing demographics, comparing contractor rates. She wasn't rushing. She was preparing. One Monday morning, I walked into the office to find her at the whiteboard with two of my younger field techs, Diego and Marley, explaining a new digital scheduling system she'd been testing. "What you guys are doing with the clipboard is fine," she said, her tone calm but firm, "but we're losing efficiency. This new tool updates routes in real time based on traffic and cancellations. You'll spend less time stuck in construction zones and more time fixing what actually needs fixing." They nodded, clearly impressed. "She's good," Marley said later with a smirk. "Boss, you better watch out. She's going to take over." "I wouldn't mind," I replied. That afternoon, I stepped into my office and closed the door behind me. For the first time in years, I considered something that had once felt like betrayal, stepping back. Not quitting, not disappearing, but creating space for someone else to lead. The thought wasn't scary anymore. It felt earned. Of course, life has a way of testing you the moment you start to feel steady. The first call came just before closing. It was one of our major commercial clients, Ridgecrest Medical Complex. We had serviced their HVAC systems for over 5 years. Now, they were under new management, and the new facilities director was reevaluating vendor partnerships. Corporate speak for, "We might cut you." I sat in silence as the man explained they'd be inviting other companies to bid on the annual service contract. "We're not unhappy with your work," he said, "but a few of our board members want to explore greener, more scalable solutions. We've actually been developing exactly that." I told him. "Energy-efficient upgrades, solar integration. Then I'd suggest including that in your proposal," he interrupted. The call ended, and the pressure began. Losing Ridgecrest would be a blow, financially but also symbolically. They'd been with us since year 2. Their logo was on our website. Their word-of-mouth referrals had helped us grow. If they walked away now, it would send a message. Maybe we weren't as future-proof as we thought. I called a staff meeting that evening. I laid it out straight. "We have 2 weeks to prepare a proposal that not only keeps Ridgecrest," I said, "but positions us as the obvious choice for the next 10 years. Silence. Then Sophie spoke. "We've already done the groundwork. Marley's been collecting data on energy usage reductions from our retrofits. I've been running cost savings models on eco upgrades. If we frame this the right way, we don't just keep Ridgecrest. We leapfrog the competition." I looked at her. "You're taking the lead," I said. The room stirred. "Me?" she asked, blinking. "Yeah, you've been building toward this. It's your strategy, your numbers. You present it." She hesitated, not out of fear, out of the weight of responsibility. Then she nodded. "Okay." The next 10 days were chaos, but the good kind. Sophie assembled a small team, Diego, Marley, and our new intern Jasmine, to build a visual pitch deck, outline a service calendar, and quantify ROI. She ran simulations, wrote scripts, rehearsed presentations until her voice cracked. And I watched. I stood to the side and offered guidance only when asked. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. The day of the presentation, we walked into Ridgecrest's boardroom, polished and ready. Sophie wore a tailored navy blazer, her notes clipped to a leather folder, her hair in a clean bun. She looked nothing like the girl who once begged me not to mention my job at a dinner party. She looked like a leader, and she spoke like one too. Confident, clear, passionate. She didn't just talk about equipment or numbers. She talked about values, about community, about building systems that didn't just work, but lasted. When the presentation ended, there was a pause. The kind that tells you they're genuinely impressed, but don't want to show their cards. "We'll be in touch," the director said. We walked out, quiet, not defeated, just drained. 2 days later, we got the call. We didn't just keep the Ridgecrest contract. We were offered a 2-year expansion deal, adding 2 more facilities to our portfolio. Sophie was the first person I called. When she answered, I didn't say anything right away. Just breathe into the phone. "What?" she asked cautiously. "We got it," I said. The silence was her celebration. Then, I'm at the store. I'm buying cake. That Friday, we closed the office early. I brought pizza. She brought 2 cakes, one that said "still standing" and another that just had a giant green check mark on it. We laughed harder than we had in months. And that night, as I locked up the office, I turned off the lights and stood at the door a little longer than usual. This business, it wasn't just mine anymore, and I was okay with that. Summer came early that year. June in Boise was already pushing past 90 by the first week, and the phones at Parker Plumbing and HVAC never stopped ringing. Emergency AC repairs, new installs, retrofits, and follow-ups from our recent Ridgecrest expansion. It was the kind of demand most business owners would dream of. But even in the whirlwind of bookings and new contracts, something felt different, like a shift was coming. I couldn't quite explain it. It started on a Wednesday afternoon, just after lunch. I was back in my office sorting payroll when Sophie knocked lightly on the doorframe. She wasn't holding her usual tablet or stack of files, just a manila envelope, and a look I couldn't quite read. "You busy?" she asked. "Never too busy," I replied, leaning back. "Come in." She walked in and sat down across from me, setting the envelope on the desk between us like it was something delicate. She didn't speak for a moment, just exhaled. "Then, I got an offer." I blinked. "Okay." She slid the envelope toward me. "It's from Cooper in Lansing. You know, the sustainability consulting firm? They have a satellite office in Seattle. One of their managers saw my Ridgecrest proposal. Apparently, it's been making the rounds on LinkedIn." I picked up the envelope and pulled out the letter inside. The name at the top of the page was one I recognized, Graham Lansing, a big name in green infrastructure and sustainable development. The letter was straightforward, a formal offer for a strategy consultant position, competitive salary, benefits, relocation support. Start date, in 6 weeks. I set the letter down. "They want you." She nodded. "Yeah, that's a hell of an opportunity." "It is." We sat in silence. I could feel the air between us shift, thicker now, heavier. Not hostile, just uncertain. "I didn't apply," she said quickly. "They reached out to me." I nodded. "Makes sense. You're good at what you do." She looked at me, eyes searching. "I haven't accepted it." "Why not?" She hesitated. "Because I don't know if leaving would feel like growing or betraying." There it was. The truth laid bare on the table between us. "I didn't bring this up to pressure you," she added. I needed to be honest. I wanted you to hear it from me first." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. "Sophie, you've already proven yourself here. You took the tools I gave you and built something better. If someone else sees that too and wants to give you a bigger stage, hell, that's not betrayal. That's recognition. But we just got Ridgecrest. We're finally stable. You were talking about expansion. And we still can expand," I said gently. "With or without you." She looked down, fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. "That's not what I want." "What do you want?" I asked. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw real conflict in her eyes. Not indecision. Conflict. "I want to grow," she said. "I want to make an impact. But I don't want to walk away from this. From you." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, I could see Diego backing the service van into its usual spot. Marley and Jasmine were unloading ductwork. It was a regular day, and yet it felt like something was about to end, or maybe evolve. I turned back to her. I'm not going to guilt you, I said. This place, this business, it was built to run with or without me, and definitely without handcuffs. If you leave, I'll be proud of you. If you stay, I'll be grateful. But either way, I'll still be your brother. Her eyes welled up. You really mean that? Of course I do. What kind of brother and boss would I be if I didn't? She smiled, wiping her eyes. A stubborn one. I chuckled. I can still be that too. We didn't talk much more that afternoon. She took the letter back and promised to think on it for a few days. But I knew Sophie. She wasn't stalling. She was wrestling. And over the next week, I saw it. She was still doing her job, efficient, focused, collected, but there was a quiet sadness in her, like someone trying to memorize a place before saying goodbye. Then came Friday. I walked into the office early and found a note on my desk, folded in half, with my name written in her handwriting. Inside it said, I said no. I don't need a bigger stage. I've already found the right story, and I want to keep writing it with you. Sophie. I sat back in my chair, completely still. For a moment, I just breathed. Then I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, a relieved one. Later that day, she walked in like it was any other morning. You saw it, she asked. I did. Still want me around? She teased. Always. She laughed, then pulled out a notepad. Okay then, about that second location. By the end of the summer, Sophie had taken full control of planning the Twin Falls branch. She interviewed local hires, coordinated contractor bids, and started scouting office space. She even began mentoring Jasmine, who showed a real interest in operations. One night, as we were closing up, Sophie looked around the office and said, You know what I realized? What? I didn't stay because I was scared to leave. I stayed because I finally understood the value of building something that matters, even if it's not flashy. I nodded. Good. Because what we've got here, it matters more than you know. 3 months later, the Parker Plumbing and HVAC logo went up on a brand new building in Twin Falls. It wasn't flashy, just a simple 2-story brick space on the edge of a growing commercial district. A loading bay in the back, a modest reception up front, a few open offices, one of which now had Sophie's name on the door. She didn't ask for it. I just had the plaque made one day. Sophie Parker, Director of Strategic Operations. It felt right. The grand opening was small. We didn't cut ribbons or hand out champagne. We grilled burgers in the parking lot, handed out coupons to locals, and let the smell of charcoal and fresh paint speak for itself. Diego drove in with his wife and twin toddlers. Marley brought homemade lemonade in a giant cooler. Even some of the Ridgecrest crew made the drive to show support. Sophie stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, walking between new hires like she'd done this her whole life. And for a while, everything ran smoothly. Calls came in. Jobs got done. Reviews were positive. Sophie led with clarity and calm. She even started training Jasmine, now in her final year of college, to become assistant operations lead. But growth is never without friction. And friction came in the form of a man named Alan Givens. Alan was one of the new hires, early 40s, ex-contractor, years of experience, but also years of bad habits. He was good with tools, fast with installs, and horrible with authority, especially female authority. The first warning signs came quiet. A snide comment here, a refusal to follow a protocol there. Then one afternoon, Jasmine came to Sophie, visibly shaken. He called me the secretary, she said. Told a client I was just here to smile and make the office look less boring. Sophie's face changed immediately, jaw tightening, shoulders squaring. Did he say that in front of a client? Jasmine nodded, and when I corrected him, he laughed and said I needed to lighten up. Sophie didn't yell. She didn't storm out. She walked straight into Alan's workspace and asked him to join her in her office. Her voice was level, her expression unreadable. I wasn't there, but I'd see the camera footage later, just 2 figures behind glass, one sitting like a stone, the other speaking with slow, deliberate gestures. She didn't fire him, not right away. Instead, she documented the complaint, gave him a formal warning, and offered retraining on workplace conduct. It was more grace than I probably would have given. But Alan didn't take the olive branch. Instead, he took it as a challenge. Over the next 2 weeks, he made life harder for everyone. Arrived late, ignored job protocols, subtly undermined Sophie's authority in front of junior staff. He never broke a policy clean enough to warrant immediate termination, but he frayed every edge. It all came to a head on a Thursday morning. I had driven down from Boise to review quarterly numbers and check in. Sophie looked tired but composed when I walked into her office. "We need to talk about Alan," she said without hesitation. "I figured," I replied. "I've read the logs. Saw the footage. You've been patient." She leaned back. "I've tried everything. Warnings, feedback, mediation. He's not changing. And now it's starting to affect the team. Then you know what you have to do." She stared at me for a long second. "I've never fired anyone before. That's why I'm here," I said. "To stand with you, but not to do it for you." She exhaled, nodded, and picked up her phone. "Alan," she said calmly, "can you step into my office, please?" 10 minutes later, it was done. Alan didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just scoffed, stood up, and walked out with a final sneer. "You'll regret this." "No," Sophie said quietly. "I won't." After he left, she sat in silence. I let her. Finally, she said, "Why did that feel harder than it should have?" "Because you're not just running a business," I told her. "You're shaping a culture. And people who ruin culture don't always come with warning labels." She nodded slowly. "I want this place to feel like you made Boise feel for me, safe, fair, professional. I want the next girl who walks in here to know she'll be seen for her skills, not her smile." "And she will," I said. We didn't talk about Alan after that. Instead, we talked about what came next. Over the next month, Sophie brought in a new hire, Claire, a certified HVAC tech who'd been passed over at 3 other companies because some clients aren't comfortable with female techs. We gave her a truck, a uniform, and a full caseload. Within 2 weeks, Claire was outperforming most of the veteran crew. One afternoon, I saw Claire and Jasmine eating lunch together out back, laughing. No tension, no side eyes, just respect. Sophie joined me near the loading dock, coffee in hand. "I think we're onto something," she said, watching them. She grinned. Okay, you started it. But I think I'm finally earning my part." I looked at her, really looked. Gone was the girl who once asked me to pretend I wasn't who I was. In her place stood a woman who had found not just her place, but her purpose. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe something I hadn't dared to hope before. Someday this whole business might actually be hers. Autumn brought a kind of golden calm to Twin Falls. The days grew shorter, but our work days stayed long. Sophie had settled into her role at the new branch with a quiet confidence that didn't need proving anymore. She led meetings without hesitation, solved client issues with grace, and handled our growing team like someone born for leadership. Claire had become a star technician. Jasmine was now leading the afternoon shift. And for the first time since opening the second location, I started to believe, genuinely believe, that I could take my hands off the wheel. But then came a crisis. It started like most problems do, small, almost forgettable. A routine job, a standard ductwork installation for a new office complex called Riverbend West. Claire and Marley had handled the job, which was part of a larger contract. No issues. The building passed inspection. The client was satisfied. Until 3 weeks later, when we got a call. Apparently, several employees on the second floor were experiencing breathing issues. Scratchy throats. Coughing. One woman had been taken to urgent care after wheezing through a meeting. All signs pointed to something environmental, and we were the ones who'd installed the system. Sophie took the call herself. By noon, she had already driven out to the site with Claire and our lead inspector, double-checking every line, every filter, every possible source. Nothing obvious was wrong. The system ran smoothly. Airflow was balanced. But the complaints were stacking up, and the building's property manager, under pressure from the tenant company, wanted answers. The next morning, I got a text from Sophie. "Need you at Twin Falls. Might get messy." I arrived by 10. Sophie was in the break room, reviewing reports. She looked focused, but there was a tension in her shoulders I hadn't seen since the early Ridgecrest days. "We've done 3 walkthroughs," she said. Claire's team can't find any mechanical faults. Everything's up to code. But the property manager's starting to panic. They want us to take the blame before they do. Is there any evidence it's on us? I asked. She hesitated. Not directly, but we're the last ones who touched the system, which means we're the easy target. I sat down across from her. So what's your gut say? She closed the folder. Something's off, but I don't think it's our work. An hour later, we were back on site. The building manager, a balding man named Carl who spoke like every word cost him money, met us at the front entrance. We've got 5 complaints now, he snapped. If you don't get this under control, I'm bringing in a third-party inspector and sending your company the bill. I saw Sophie stiffen slightly, but she didn't react. She just nodded. We'll figure it out, she said. We want this resolved as much as you do. Carl scoffed. You better. Back inside, Sophie split us up. Claire and Marley checked duct lines again. I followed her to the basement utility room. She opened the main unit panel, studied the air intake for a moment, then pointed at a small corner in the upper shaft. See that? I looked closer. Mold. Tiny, almost invisible patches blooming just behind the insulation foam. Likely from condensation buildup that had nothing to do with our install, but everything to do with the building's shoddy maintenance before we even got there. Found your culprit, I said. Sophie didn't smile. She took photos, documented the location, and checked the surrounding ducts. Then she called Carl. 30 minutes later, we sat across from him with a printed report. This isn't a mechanical failure, Sophie explained. It's an insulation breach that caused humidity to collect in the main shaft. That mold was likely growing before we even installed your system. But because it wasn't visible and your building didn't have it cleaned prior, we ended up circulating air through it. Carl was quiet, visibly annoyed, but unable to refute the evidence. So it's not your fault, he muttered. No, Sophie said, but we're still going to fix it. He looked up, surprised. Why? Because the people working in this building deserve to breathe clean air, and we stand behind our name, even when the issue isn't ours. Carl didn't say thank you, but he signed off on the remediation plan we proposed. Within 48 hours, we had cleaned the shaft, replaced the compromised filters, and installed a secondary air purification unit on our dime. When the tenant company sent a letter the next week praising our professionalism and quick response, Carl forwarded it with a single sentence. Guess I owe you one. I called Sophie into the office after that. Most companies would have walked away, I said, or sent a legal notice saying it wasn't their problem. Sophie leaned back in the chair. I know. So why didn't we? She looked at me. Because this company isn't just about pipes and vents anymore. It's about people. And if we're going to keep growing, that has to be what guides us. I sat in silence for a moment. That, I said finally, was the right call. I know, she said softly, but it still scared me. Good, I replied. You should be scared. Means you care. She smiled. In the months that followed, the Riverbend West situation became a case study in our onboarding manual. New hires were walked through it, not as a technical lesson, but a cultural one. A reminder that reputation is built when no one's watching and earned when everyone's expecting you to fail. And Sophie? She had faced her first public crisis. Not with panic, not with blame, but with integrity. That's when I knew she wasn't just ready to run a location. She was ready if she wanted to run the whole thing. The email came on a rainy Thursday morning. I was in the Boise office, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing last month's expense report when my inbox pinged. The subject line read, Nomination Notification, Western Small Business Awards 2025. I almost deleted it, thinking it was another spam pitch. But something made me click, and that's when I saw her name. Sophie Parker, finalist, Young Business Leader of the Year. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't a mistake. She'd been nominated for one of the most prestigious regional awards in the Western U.S., not just for her age group, but for anyone under 40. Apparently, someone from Ridgecrest had submitted her name along with a write-up about the Riverbend incident and our company's response. They'd praised her leadership, clarity under pressure, and what they called unshakable moral compass in the face of escalating public scrutiny. I couldn't stop smiling. When I forwarded her the email, she replied with just 2 words. Wait, what? Later that day, she called. I didn't apply for anything, she said, still a little dazed. This has to be a mistake. It's not, I said. You're being seen, sophomore, for exactly who you are. They want me to come speak, she whispered, at the banquet, with like a real speech. Well, you better start writing one. She laughed, nervous and excited all at once. Oh God, the banquet was 3 weeks away, scheduled for a Saturday night at a historic hotel ballroom in downtown Salt Lake City. I offered to drive, but Sophie insisted on making the trip herself. Said she needed time alone in the car to think, to prepare, to not freak out. I told her she'd be brilliant. I meant it. That night, I sat at home and thought about everything. How far she'd come, how far we'd both come, and how, in some strange way, the moment I let go of needing recognition was the exact moment she began to receive it. The night of the banquet, I showed up uninvited. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted to be there. Not as a protector, not even as a brother, just as someone proud to witness the next chapter. The ballroom was beautiful, golden lights, glass chandeliers, white linen tables. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, city officials. I fell out of place in my off-the-rack suit until I saw Sophie across the room. She was wearing a navy blue dress, simple, elegant, and a quiet kind of confidence that turned heads even when she wasn't trying. She scanned the room, then saw me and blinked in surprise. You said you weren't coming, she hissed when she reached me. I lied. I shrugged. It's allowed when the person I helped raise gets nominated for a major award. She laughed, her eyes misting. Thank you. I'll be in the back, I said. Just pretend I'm not here. Impossible. We hugged quickly. Then she was swept away by the event organizer for her prep session. An hour later, her category was announced. The MC read off the achievements of 3 finalists. One who'd founded a software startup, one who'd expanded a chain of eco-friendly dry cleaners, and then Sophie. When her name was called, she didn't flinch. She stood, walked to the stage, and took the mic. Hi, she began, her voice clear but steady. My name is Sophie Parker. And until recently, I thought leadership meant being in charge. Pause. It doesn't. The room quieted. Leadership means being accountable, being teachable. It means showing up even when you're scared, and standing up even when it would be easier to stay silent. She told them about the Riverbend mold crisis, about making the choice to fix a problem they didn't cause, simply because it was the right thing to do. She talked about small business ethics, the dignity of trade work, and what it meant to earn people's trust, not just their money. And then she said something that silenced the entire ballroom. I used to think I had to escape where I came from in order to be someone. But now I know becoming someone means becoming someone others can rely on. And for me, that started the day I walked into my brother's HVAC office, not as a sister, but as a student. I couldn't breathe for a moment. The applause came slowly, then rose like a wave. She didn't win first place that night. The award went to the software guy, but it didn't matter, because by the end of the evening, people weren't lining up to talk to him. They were lining up to talk to Sophie. City officials, fellow nominees, even reporters from 2 regional business magazines. They asked about her leadership style, her company, her future. And in every answer, she pointed back to our roots. We're a family company, she said. One that believes success doesn't come from looking important. It comes from being useful. We drove back the next morning. She had the finalist plaque on her lap, staring at it like it didn't belong to her. You did it, I said at a stoplight. I didn't win, she replied. You won every eye in the room, and you made them remember your name. That's bigger. She didn't answer, just smiled, quiet and full. Back in Twin Falls, the crew surprised her with a celebration. Claire baked cookies. Marley made a banner that read, Finalist today. Boss always. Jasmine cried. I stood in the back, watching it all unfold. And I realized something. The best leaders don't need a stage. They build one. And then they make space for others to stand on it, too. A year later, the sign on the Boise office changed. It still said Parker Plumbing and HVAC. That wasn't going anywhere. But underneath, in clean, brushed steel, a new line had been added. Founded by Ethan Parker, now led by Sophie Parker. No fanfare, no press release, just a quiet shift in ownership that marked the end of one era, and the start of another. It had been coming for a while. The moment Sophie returned from the Salt Lake Awards banquet, something in her clicked into place. Not louder, not bolder, just firmer, like she'd finally accepted that her voice belonged in every room. By the end of the year, she was overseeing both locations. She'd hired new department heads, restructured our training program, and expanded our client base into 2 additional counties. She was thriving, and I was ready, not to leave completely, but to finally let go of being the one everyone looked to for the final answer. I had spent 2 decades building this company with sweat and scraped knuckles. It was part of me, but it didn't need to only be me anymore. The decision came in February. Sophie called a full staff meeting, both locations, over Zoom. I thought it was just our quarterly update, but partway through her presentation, she paused. "I want to share something important," she said. "Today marks a transition. As of this quarter, Ethan will be stepping back from day-to-day operations." Gasps. A few confused looks. Sophie smiled. "Don't worry. He's not going anywhere. He'll still be around, mentoring, advising, and probably fixing the office coffee machine like only he knows how. But starting today, I'll be stepping into the role of CEO." She didn't fumble the words. She didn't look to me for approval. She stood on her own. And in that moment, I felt something I didn't expect. Peace. After the call, I walked into her office. "Guess that makes you the boss now," I teased. She gave me a look. "You okay with that?" I smiled. "I wouldn't have stayed this long if I wasn't waiting for you to get here." She sat back, thoughtful. "You know, for a long time, I thought stepping into leadership meant I had to prove I wasn't like you. That stung a little, but I stayed quiet. And then," she continued, "I realized I didn't need to be different. I just needed to be ready. And the truth is, I still carry everything you taught me. Every detail, every late-night call, every hard lesson." She looked up at me, eyes soft. "This company has your fingerprints in its foundation, but it has my name on its future." I nodded. That night, I left the office without a to-do list for the next morning. No invoices to check. No schedules to approve. I drove home, made dinner, and watched a game for the first time in what felt like years without checking my email during halftime. It was strange and beautiful. In the weeks that followed, Sophie made good on her word. She wasn't trying to reinvent the business. She was refining it. She introduced a mentorship pipeline, helping younger techs transition into management. She launched a social impact initiative, offering free seasonal checkups for elderly homeowners on fixed incomes. She even started a local podcast called Working Hands, Clear Minds, where she interviewed small business owners about the emotional side of leadership. It took off faster than either of us expected. One of her episodes, titled "The First Time I Fired Someone," got picked up by a national business media page. Her inbox flooded with messages. Young women from across the country, thanking her for speaking honestly. Former clients sharing their gratitude. Local schools asking if she'd guest lecture. One evening, we were sitting at a diner off the highway, her laptop open between us, podcast stats pulled up, when she turned and said, "Did you ever imagine this would be our life?" I shook my head. I imagined something smaller, steadier, fixing pipes, changing filters, maybe retiring with a decent pension. She laughed. "And instead, you ended up mentoring a CEO?" "No," I corrected her. "I ended up watching my little sister become something even better than a CEO." She raised an eyebrow. "What's better than CEO?" "An example." She blinked. Her face softened. "Thank you," she said. We sat in silence for a while. Not awkward silence, just full. 6 months later, I officially stepped into a consulting role. No more full days at the office. No more back-to-back schedules. Just monthly check-ins, big picture planning, and the occasional training workshop when the newer techs needed the old guy with the magic wrench. I spent more time hiking, rebuilding my garage, even started volunteering at a local trade school. And on Fridays, I still stopped by the office. But now, Sophie had the corner desk. And when people asked me who I was, I smiled and said, "I work for her." There's a photo on my desk at home now. It's the 2 of us standing outside the Twin Falls branch. The sun's behind us. She's holding a clipboard. I've got my hands in my pockets. We're laughing about something neither of us remembers. But what I do remember is this. She never asked to run the company. She earned it, not through blood, not through inheritance, but through integrity, through resilience, through love. The kind of love that fixes things not because it's easy, but because it matters. That's the legacy, not mine, ours. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet heroes building something meaningful every single day, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. And in the comments below, tell us, who's the person in your life that believed in you before you believed in yourself? We'd love to hear your story, because sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in money or titles, but in the people we lift up along the way. See you in the next story.